A cool silver moon hung low in the sky, its glow casting eerie shadows against the towering Victorian silhouette of the Blackwood Hotel. The building, a relic of another century, loomed over the city streets like a guardian of forgotten secrets. Its grand facade, adorned with intricate stone carvings and ivy-choked balconies, whispered of stories long buried within its walls. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock stepped out of their chauffeured car, their laughter fading into the hushed midnight air. The day had been grueling. Press conferences, interviews, flashing cameras, and scripted answers. Now the only thing they craved was a peaceful night's rest. Sandra ran her fingers through her hair, shaking off the exhaustion as she looked up at the ornate hotel entrance. "We really should have stayed here before," she mused, her voice carrying a mix of admiration and fatigue. Keanu gave a small, thoughtful nod. "Yeah, feels like a place with a lot of stories." He glanced around, his sharp eyes noting the way the flickering gas lamp-style lights cast long, wavering shadows across the stone floor. As they entered the grand lobby, the air changed. It was richer somehow, thick with the scent of aged mahogany and old leather, tinged with something else, something unfamiliar. A tall, elderly gentleman in a meticulously pressed burgundy uniform greeted them. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his piercing gray eyes held an unreadable depth. "Welcome," he said, his voice smooth but edged with something just beneath the surface. "You must be Mr. Reeves and Miss Bullock," he continued, pulling two brass keys from behind the desk. "Your suites are on the 4th floor, connecting rooms as requested." Sandra smiled politely, though a flicker of curiosity crossed her features. "It's a beautiful hotel," she remarked, her gaze traveling across the gleaming marble floors and grand staircase winding toward the upper levels. The old man's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Oh, indeed. The Blackwood has seen many illustrious guests and witnessed its fair share of unusual occurrences." He hesitated before adding, almost as an afterthought, "Do let me know if you require anything during the night." Something about the way he said it sent a nearly imperceptible shiver down Keanu's spine. But before he could dwell on it, Sandra looped an arm through his and tugged him toward the elevators. Their rooms, located at the very end of the 4th floor corridor, were nothing short of spectacular. Heavy velvet drapes framed towering windows that offered breathtaking views of the city skyline. Ornate wallpaper in deep, regal hues gave the space a timeless elegance, while antique furniture completed the ambiance. Keanu's suite was on the west side, Sandra's on the east. Between them stood a set of solid oak double doors with brass handles, separating yet connecting their rooms. Sandra kicked off her shoes, sinking into a plush armchair as she exhaled deeply. "I could sleep for a week," she murmured. Keanu chuckled from his own side of the suite, dropping his leather bag onto the bed. "Same." The grandfather clock in the corner struck 2. A deep, resonant chime rolled through the room like distant thunder. Then, silence. A silence so profound it felt unnatural, as if the entire building was holding its breath. Sandra was the first to notice the change in temperature. The warmth of the room had been replaced by a creeping chill, the kind that settles deep into your bones. She reached for the blanket draped over the foot of her bed, pulling it around her shoulders. In the next room, Keanu stood by his window, watching the flickering streetlights below. Something felt off. The quiet wasn't the comfortable kind. It was dense, weighted, like an unseen presence had filled the space. Then a whisper, faint, indistinct. It came from somewhere in the room, but from nowhere at all. Sandra sat up sharply, her pulse quickening. "Keanu?" she called softly, half expecting him to laugh and tell her it was just the old pipes settling. But he had heard it too. Not just a whisper, but whispers. Layered, overlapping, hushed voices murmuring in a language neither of them recognized. Keanu turned toward the connecting doors, his hand hovering just above the brass handle. "Sandra!" His voice was calm but carried an unspoken question. She was already out of bed, moving toward the doors from her side. "Open it," she said, gripping the handle. Together they turned the knobs and pulled the doors open. A gust of frigid air rushed between them, and then a child's laughter, high-pitched, faint, echoing as if carried from a great distance. Sandra swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the doorframe. That wasn't the pipes. Keanu took a slow step forward. The whispers returned, swirling around them like unseen specters. The antique mirror above the fireplace began to fog over, though the room was bone dry. Then right before their eyes, words appeared on the glass, traced by an invisible hand. "Remember 1922. The letters glistened for a moment before fading, leaving only their wide-eyed reflections staring back. The Blackwood Hotel had a story to tell, and it had chosen them to listen. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of the city outside, oblivious to the chilling spectacle unfolding inside the Blackwood Hotel. Sandra's breath was shallow, her pulse thrumming in her ears. "Tell me you saw that," she murmured, barely above a whisper. Keanu, still staring at the now clear mirror, gave a single nod. "Yeah." His voice was calm, steady, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something even he couldn't quite place. Sandra turned toward the fireplace, rubbing her arms to chase away the lingering cold. "Remember 1922, she repeated. "What happened here that year?" Keanu's gaze flickered toward the door. "I don't know, but I think we should find out." Just then, the air in the room shifted. It was subtle at first, like a change in pressure before a storm, but then came the sound, soft at first, like distant footsteps. But the more they listened, the more distinct it became. Someone or something was walking in the hallway outside. Sandra reached for her phone, her fingers hovering over the flashlight function. "Who else is even on this floor?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The hotel had felt eerily empty since their arrival. Keanu moved toward the door, pausing just before reaching for the handle. The footsteps had stopped, but now there was something else, a scratching sound. It was coming from the other side of the door, slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across the wood. Sandra's breath caught in her throat. "Okay, that's definitely not housekeeping." Keanu reached out, gripping the handle. Before he could turn it, a single, unmistakable knock echoed through the room. Sandra took a step back. "We're not opening that." Keanu hesitated, then slowly moved away from the door, nodding in agreement. "Yeah, probably a bad idea." But then the knob twisted on its own. Neither of them moved as the door creaked open an inch, revealing only darkness beyond. The hallway, which had been well lit when they entered their rooms, was now completely shrouded in shadow. Sandra turned her phone's flashlight toward the opening, but the beam barely penetrated the darkness. It was as if the shadows were swallowing the light. Then came the whisper, a single voice this time. Clear. Director. "Hurry!" The door swung open all the way, revealing the empty hallway, or at least it should have been empty. Sandra's flashlight swept across the corridor, landing on something near the far end. A figure barely visible. A man dressed in a dark, old-fashioned suit standing perfectly still. His face was obscured by shadows, but there was something unmistakably wrong about him. Keanu tensed. "Do you see?" But before he could finish, the figure moved, not in the way a normal person would. It was abrupt, jerky, like a marionette being pulled by unseen strings. Sandra's grip on her phone tightened. Nope, I'm out." She grabbed Keanu's arm and pulled him back into the room, slamming the door shut. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room was silent again, the eerie chill still clinging to the air. Then Keanu turned toward the mirror. The words had reappeared, only now more had been added. "Remember 1922? Room 412. Sandra exhaled sharply. "Room 412, she repeated. "That has to mean something." Keanu nodded, his mind racing. "If we're going to figure this out, that's where we need to go." Sandra crossed her arms. "You do realize that everything in me is screaming not to go investigate the obviously haunted room, right?" Keanu gave her a small, almost amused smirk. "Yeah, but we're still going, aren't we?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Yeah, we are." The hallway felt different now. Gone was the elegant charm of the Blackwood Hotel. In its place was something else, an oppressive stillness, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Sandra and Keanu moved quietly, their steps careful on the polished wooden floor. The hallway stretched before them, endless in the dim light. The number plaques on each door gleamed faintly as they passed. 408, 409, 410. Then they saw it. Room 412. The door looked no different from the others, yet standing before it, they felt it, the weight of something unseen pressing against them. Keanu reached out, gripping the handle. It was ice cold. He glanced at Sandra, who nodded. Then with a slow, deliberate motion, he turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was empty. No furniture, no decorations, just an expanse of dust-covered floorboards and peeling wallpaper. But then Sandra's phone flickered. The flashlight cut out for a second, plunging them into darkness before blinking back to life. And that's when they saw it. In the center of the room stood a chair, not an antique, not something that belonged in a luxury hotel, a rusted metal chair, bolted to the floor. Sandra swallowed hard. "Keanu, what the hell is this?" Keanu didn't answer. He was staring at the floor beneath the chair. Faint, barely visible carvings were etched into the wood, letters, numbers, and one phrase that sent a chill through them both. "I never left." Before either of them could react, the door slammed shut behind them, and the whispers returned, louder, urgent. But this time, they weren't coming from the walls. They were coming from the chair. The door slammed shut with such force that the entire room seemed to tremble. Sandra spun around, her pulse hammering in her ears. "No, no, no!" She lunged for the handle, twisting it desperately. It wouldn't budge. Keanu turned back to the chair, his breath visible in the frigid air. The whispers had grown louder, no longer a distant murmur, but a chorus of hushed, urgent voices swirling around them. Sandra pounded against the door. "This isn't funny." Then, without warning, the whispers stopped. Silence pressed in from all sides, thick and suffocating. The only sound was their breathing, shallow and uneven. Keanu took a step toward the chair. "Something happened here," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Sandra turned to face him. "Yeah, and whatever it was, I'd rather not find out the hard way." But then Keanu's gaze dropped to the floor, to the words carved into the wood beneath the chair. "I never left." Sandra swallowed hard. "Okay, what does that mean?" Keanu's fingers brushed over the carvings. They were deep, jagged, done in desperation. Whoever had left them had been trapped here. Then the air shifted again. The temperature plummeted, and that's when they heard it. A slow, deliberate creaking. The chair moved. Sandra inhaled sharply. "Nope, nope, absolutely not." But the chair wasn't done. It turned, not by much, just a fraction, just enough to face them directly. Keanu's jaw tightened. He wasn't the type to scare easily, but this was different. This was wrong. Then came the sound of breathing, not theirs, from the shadows in the farthest corner of the room. Deep, ragged. Sandra's grip on her phone tightened. Her flashlight flickered again. "Keanu," she whispered, "tell me you see that." Keanu followed her gaze. At first there was nothing, just darkness. Then, movement. Something shifted in the shadows, barely visible. A figure huddled, motionless. Then it stood. Slowly, the flashlight flickered, the beam catching glimpses of something old. Clothes that didn't belong in this century. A face obscured by darkness. Sandra took an instinctive step back. "Oh my God!" The figure took a step forward. Keanu grabbed her arm. "Move! Now!" They turned, throwing their weight against the door. It still wouldn't budge. The whispers returned, louder, urgent, and in the mirror hanging on the wall beside them, new words appeared in the fog. "Behind the wall!" Sandra's eyes darted to Keanu. "What does that mean?" He turned back toward the room, scanning the walls. Then he saw it, a section of the wallpaper near the fireplace that looked different. Faded, as if it had been tampered with. He didn't hesitate. Rushing forward, he pressed his hand against it, feeling for any weak points. Sandra kept her eyes on the figure in the corner. It was moving faster now. "Keanu, whatever you're doing, do it faster." Keanu's fingers found a loose panel. With a grunt, he yanked it away, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was an old leather-bound journal. The moment he pulled it free, the whispers changed. A single voice rose above them all. A woman's voice, trembling yet grateful. "Thank you." The air in the room shifted. The heaviness lifted. Then just like that, the figure was gone. The door behind them creaked open. Sandra exhaled a shaky breath. "I don't know if I want to scream or pass out." Keanu held up the journal, flipping through its fragile pages. The entries were written in elegant, rushed handwriting. The name on the first page sent a chill down his spine. Elizabeth Barrett. Sandra blinked. "Wait, wasn't that—" Keanu nodded. "Thomas Barrett's wife." The pieces were falling into place. The whispers, the chair. The year 1922. Something terrible had happened in this hotel. And now they held the key to uncovering the truth. Keanu flipped through the fragile, time-worn pages of the journal, the faded ink barely legible in the dim light. Sandra leaned over his shoulder, her breath still uneven. "Elizabeth Barrett," she murmured. "Thomas Barrett's wife, the owner of this hotel." Keanu nodded, carefully turning to the first full entry. The date at the top read June 10th, 1922. June 10th, 1922. "They're coming for him. Thomas says we can trust no one. The men from the bank. No, not just them. Someone else. Someone who knows what he's done. He was trying to help people, to give them safety, new identities. But now they want to silence him. I fear what will happen if they find the letter. If they find out the truth hidden in the walls of room 412, he told me to wait for him, but I know I never will, because I already hear them coming." Sandra let out a slow breath, her fingers tightening on the edge of the journal. "Oh my God!" Keanu's eyes darkened as he flipped ahead, scanning for more clues. The pages became more frantic, the handwriting unsteady. June 15th, 1922. He's gone. They say it was an accident, that he fell from the top floor. But I know better. I know what I heard that night, what I saw. He didn't fall. They pushed him. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I knew the letter was safe. I hid it, behind the painting in the lobby, where no one will think to look. If anyone finds this journal, please, find the letter. The truth must be known." Sandra's stomach twisted. She knew. She knew they murdered him. Keanu exhaled, the weight of the discovery pressing against his chest. And she tried to protect the truth. The room around them seemed to shift, the air no longer heavy with whispers. Instead, there was something else. Something lighter. A sense of relief. Sandra touched the old leather cover of the journal. "The letter's still here, behind the painting." Keanu nodded. "And we're going to find it." A sudden noise made them both freeze. Footsteps, heavy, purposeful, coming from the hallway. Sandra's breath caught in her throat. "We're not alone." Keanu quickly slid the journal into his jacket and grabbed her hand. "We need to move. Now." Without hesitation, they slipped out of room 412 and into the dimly lit hallway. The grand lobby was their destination, the massive antique painting above the fireplace. But someone else was already looking for it. And they weren't the only ones who knew what had been hidden since 1922. Keanu and Sandra moved quickly, their footsteps light against the polished wooden floor as they hurried down the dimly lit hallway. The grand lobby was just ahead, but so were the footsteps behind them, steady, deliberate, and unmistakably following. Sandra's pulse pounded in her ears. "Tell me that's just Harrison checking on us." Keanu didn't answer. He already knew whoever was behind them wasn't friendly. As they rounded the last corner before the lobby, Sandra risked a glance over her shoulder. A tall, dark figure stood at the end of the hallway, dressed in a long coat, his face obscured by shadows, watching, waiting. Sandra grabbed Keanu's arm. "We need to move." They burst into the grand lobby, the towering oil painting of the Blackwood Hotel looming above the stone fireplace. The room was dark, save for the flickering light from a chandelier swaying slightly, as if something had disturbed the air. Keanu wasted no time. He stepped onto the marble hearth, running his hands along the edges of the ornate gold frame. Elizabeth wrote that she hid the letter behind this. Sandra kept watch, her eyes flicking toward the entrance. The figure had moved. They were running out of time. Keanu pressed against the bottom edge of the frame. Something clicked. The painting shifted slightly forward, revealing a hidden compartment in the wall. Inside, an aged envelope sealed with wax. Sandra snatched it just as the lobby lights flickered violently, casting jagged shadows across the walls. The whispering returned. Only this time, it wasn't just whispers. A woman's voice, urgent, pleading. "Run!" The sound of the front doors slamming shut echoed through the lobby. Sandra turned to Keanu, her eyes wide. "We have to go. Now!" Keanu shoved the letter into his jacket just as the figure entered the lobby. For the first time, they saw his face. It was wrong, distorted, like something unfinished, blurred at the edges of reality. His eyes were hollow, empty black voids, and he was moving toward them. The chandeliers exploded in a rain of glass. The letter burned like fire against Keanu's chest. And then, the whispers stopped. The figure was gone. The hotel stood silent, the air warm again. Sandra exhaled sharply, her body trembling. "Tell me that just happened." Keanu pulled the letter from his jacket. "It happened." They exchanged a glance. They had the letter, and now they had to uncover the truth. But some secrets were buried for a reason. The grand lobby stood eerily silent. The shattered remnants of the chandelier glittered on the floor like fallen stars, reflecting the dim light from the fireplace. Sandra and Keanu remained frozen for a moment, their breaths shallow, the weight of the letter in Keanu's hands grounding them in the present. Sandra swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What just happened?" Keanu exhaled slowly, his grip tightening around the letter. "I don't know, but whatever that was, it didn't want us to find this." They exchanged a glance, one that spoke volumes. They had a choice. They could leave, pretend none of this ever happened, or they could open the letter and finish what Elizabeth started in 1922. Sandra took a deep breath, then nodded toward the envelope. "Open it." Keanu carefully broke the wax seal, unfolding the fragile, yellowed paper inside. The ink had faded, but the words remained legible. June 15th, 1922. "To whoever finds this, if you are reading this, then I am gone. And so is Thomas." They silenced him. They tried to silence me. But the truth must be known. The men who came for us, bankers, city officials, men who wore fine suits but carried death in their pockets, were afraid of what Thomas was doing. He wasn't just running a hotel. He was running a sanctuary, a place where those who had no way out could find one. New identities, a second chance, a life free from the chains society had placed upon them. But those in power saw it as a threat. They called it treason. They called it theft. And when Thomas refused to stop, they made an example of him. They murdered my husband. Then they came for me. They think they buried this secret with us. But the walls of the Blackwood Hotel remember. The whispers you hear, the shadows you see, that is this place fighting to be heard, to be remembered. Do not let them win. Do not let them erase the truth. Find the ledger, the names, the proof. Room 312. Tell the world what happened here. Sandra stared at the letter, her chest tightening. Jesus Christ. This wasn't just about Thomas and Elizabeth. There were others. Keanu nodded. And their names are in that ledger. A sharp gust of wind rushed through the lobby, though no doors or windows had opened. The hotel had heard them, and it was showing them the way. Sandra squared her shoulders. Room 312. Keanu tucked the letter safely inside his jacket. Let's end this. Without another word, they turned and made their way toward the grand staircase, the air around them humming with something unseen. The hotel was watching and waiting, because after a century of silence, the truth was finally ready to be told. The climb to the third floor felt longer than it should have. Every step on the grand staircase echoed too loudly, as if the hotel itself was listening. Keanu and Sandra moved quickly, but with every passing second, the air grew heavier. Not cold this time, thick, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. As they reached the third floor corridor, the overhead lights flickered. A long hallway stretched before them, lined with closed doors, each one identical except for the tarnished brass numbers affixed to their surfaces. Sandra glanced at the letter again. Room 312. Keanu led the way, scanning the doors as they walked. 308, 309, 310. The whispers returned, soft at first, distant, But the closer they got to 312, the more insistent they became. And then, there it was, room 312. Sandra hesitated. The door looked no different from the others, except for the deep scratches along the frame, as if someone or something had tried to claw its way out. Keanu reached for the handle. It was warm. Too warm. His fingers barely brushed the metal before, bang! Something slammed into the door from the other side. Sandra gasped, stepping back. Nope. Number absolutely not. Keanu remained still, his pulse steady. He pressed his palm against the wood. We're not leaving. Another bang. This time, closer. Sandra clenched her jaw, her body tense like a coiled spring. If something jumps out at me, I swear to God. Keanu twisted the handle. The door swung open, and the room wasn't empty. A single wooden desk sat in the center. Dusty, old, but otherwise unremarkable. Against the far wall, a massive bookcase loomed, its shelves packed with crumbling, leather-bound volumes. But the thing that froze them both in place, the chair at the desk was rocking, back and forth, as if someone had just been sitting there and had only just stood up. Sandra inhaled sharply. Tell me you see that. Keanu nodded. Yeah. The whispers surged, rising in intensity. The air shimmered, bending the dim light like heat waves. And then, the ledger. It sat on the desk, as if waiting for them. A thick, worn book with a black leather cover, bound with twine. Keanu stepped forward, slowly reaching out. A gust of wind blasted through the room, sending loose papers flying. The whispers screamed, 100 voices all crying out at once. The door slammed shut behind them. Sandra spun around. Oh, come on! Keanu grabbed the ledger, yanking it free of the dust-covered desk. The moment he did, everything stopped. The wind, the whispers, silence. A heavy stillness filled the room, pressing against them like a held breath. Sandra swallowed. That felt like a test. Keanu flipped open the ledger, scanning the first few pages. These are names. Sandra peered over his shoulder. The people Thomas Barrett helped? Keanu nodded. Looks like it. He gave them all new identities. Fresh starts. His fingers traced the faded ink. It's all here. Sandra exhaled, rubbing her forehead. That's why they killed him. He wasn't just running a hotel. He was running an escape network. Keanu turned to the final page. The last entry was different, written in a hurried scrawl. If you find this, the truth is yours. But be warned, others will try to bury it again. They always do. The moment he read the words aloud, the lights flickered violently. The walls shook, and from somewhere deep in the hotel, a door creaked open. Sandra's stomach twisted. I don't think we're alone. Keanu tucked the ledger under his arm. Then let's not wait around to find out who else is here. They turned for the door, only to find that it wasn't locked anymore. It was open, and the hallway beyond it was no longer empty. The hallway was no longer empty. Figures stood in the shadows, watching. Not just one, dozens. Some barely visible, mere outlines in the flickering light. Others more defined, men in early 20th century suits, women in elegant dresses, their expressions unreadable. Sandra's breath hitched. Keanu! He held the ledger tightly. I see them. The air hummed with energy, charged with something ancient and powerful. Then, from the center of the crowd, one figure stepped forward. A man in a dark suit, his hair neatly combed, his face unmistakably Thomas Barrett. He lifted his hand, not in warning, but in gratitude. The whispers, once frantic, softened. Keanu and Sandra stood still, watching as the other spirits began to fade, dissolving like mist caught in the morning light. Sandra exhaled. They're leaving. Keanu nodded. Because the truth isn't buried anymore. Only one spirit remained, Elizabeth Barrett. She stood near the threshold of room 312, her presence shimmering, her eyes fixed on them. A mixture of sadness and relief washed over her face. Then she smiled and vanished. The lights in the hallway flickered back to full brightness. The weight in the air lifted. For the first time since they had entered the Blackwood Hotel, the silence felt peaceful. Sandra let out a long breath, running a hand through her hair. I think it's over. Keanu gave a small nod, glancing down at the ledger. Now we have to make sure the world knows. They made their way down the grand staircase, the once menacing hotel now strangely serene. The shattered glass from the chandelier was gone. The temperature was normal. The oppressive weight that had once filled the air had disappeared. As they stepped into the lobby, Harrison, the elderly night manager, was waiting for them. His expression was calm, almost expectant. You found it, he said softly. Keanu met his gaze. You knew. Harrison smiled faintly. I suspected. The hotel chooses who it tells its secrets to, and it chose you. Sandra studied him. What happens now? Harrison's eyes flickered toward the ledger. Now? You decide. You have the truth. Do with it what you will. Keanu and Sandra exchanged a glance. There was only one choice. They would tell the story. They would expose what had happened in 1922. Because the Blackwood Hotel wasn't haunted by vengeance. It was haunted by a truth that refused to be forgotten. As they stepped outside, the first rays of dawn stretched over the skyline, painting the hotel in golden light. Sandra sighed, shaking her head. I am never staying in a historic hotel again. Keanu chuckled. Yeah. Next time, let's just book a Marriott. They walked into the rising sun, leaving the Blackwood Hotel behind. And for the first time in a century, it was at peace.